Welcome to the New Media Show. This is episode 655, and the topic that we have today is podcast discovery broken, and not because creators aren't working hard, but because maybe the listener on-ramp is fractured and across many platforms and formats and algorithms and AI engines. So today I hope to help map what still works and what does work and what all of us need to be thinking about around kind of marketing and promotion of our podcasts. And as podcasting is expanding, as we have heard over the last couple of weeks around video, and but video has been a buzz for a long time, but that's going to have an impact on what we're going to do and how we're going to market our shows and how it's going to be positioned. So I'm a 22-year podcaster and have worked as an executive at a few podcast hosting platforms, and I'm in the Podcast Hall of Fame, like my guest is that's on the call here. My name is Rob Greenlee, and so let's just jump into it. I've got a great guest with me, Arielle Nissenblatt, who's the head of community and content at the Pinwheel, Audily, I think is the right way to pronounce that, and is also the founder of EarBuds Podcast Collective, and the host of a couple of podcasts too. She does the Trailer Park Podcast and daily tips that may or may not help you. Arielle's also a 2026 Podcast Hall of Famer. I think you're the second guest that I've had on here that's a 2026 Hall of Famer.
Wow.
I had James Gridlin on a couple of weeks ago. So Arielle, thank you for jumping on.
Thank you for having me. Excited to talk about this topic, very near and dear to my heart and to all the work that I do. Yeah,
well, Arielle, you're a trusted voice in the industry, and that's the big reason why you got recognized as a Hall of Famer at such a young age. So that's unusual.
It feels unusual, and I appreciate it so much, and I'm trying to live up to it all the time.
Oh, I'm sure you are, and it takes a lot of work. Both of us have been involved in this podcast space for many years now. I know you're young, but your experience is pretty long-standing. So when did you actually first enter the podcasting space?
As a listener, first in 2014.
2014.
I had some experience before that listening to what I didn't know at the time were podcasts by way of lectures that were assigned to me in college that were on iTunes. And I listened to some talk radio growing up, but not much. And in 2014, I really started listening to podcasts. Then a few years later, was listening all the time to podcasts, but was like, no, I got to do whatever it takes to work in this industry. So in 2017 is when I wasn't yet paid to work in podcasting, but I started the newsletter that I still run that you mentioned, EarBuds Podcast Collective, which eventually allowed me to be employed by people in the podcast space.
Yeah, that's great. And you've worked with a bunch of different companies that has given you a pretty broad experience base around how this medium works and the people in it. And you've really followed this journey. And I can totally see where you really latched on to this piece around podcast discovery and kind of marketing of the podcast, because that's one of the first two things that people ask about when it comes to podcasting is, how do I make money from it and how do I build my audience, right? And
well, there's that, and then there's the flip side of it. So I at first was approaching it from the listener perspective of I was listening to the same 5 or 6 podcasts every week, and I loved them and I looked forward to them. But when they were over, I was caught up on everything. And when they were over that week, I didn't have anything. And I knew that there was other stuff out there, but I didn't know what was worth my time or how to find something that was similar to what I was listening to, but complementary. And I didn't know it at the time that I was identifying a discovery problem or even a discoverability problem. And there's probably a difference between those things. But in retrospect now, that's what I had identified and what other people were sharing with me at the time when they were saying, I really like podcasts, but how do I find what to listen to? I'm hearing about a million people launching podcasts all the time. That was true in 2016, 2017 too. It's kind of like been a trope on SNL then and now.
Yeah.
I mean, first I thought about it from the listener perspective, and then started working with creators and in the creator space more and more for softwares and services that are geared towards creators. And that's when I started thinking about it from the creator, and how do they make something for an audience, and how do they identify that audience, and how do they serve that audience once they've figured out who they are. So how do you bring those two together, the listener and the creator? How do you help a listener find their next favorite show and help a creator find their next biggest fan?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to enter it, is looking at it from the position of the consumer of the content, or the listener, or increasingly the viewer. Because if you look at it from that perspective, it changes your lens. If you only look at it from the perspective of being a content creator and a publisher, that gives you a different focus. And this is one of the things that I've really kind of wrestled with over many years, especially on this show, the media show, with my co-host, Todd Cochran, who's no longer with us, rest in peace, is that I kept talking to him about, well, how does the listener think about this, right? But he wanted to always talk about how the publishers look at it, which is fine.
Very important too.
Yeah, I give him credit for that. But it is, I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is a parting of the seas on this.
There's a knowledge gap between the people that make the thing and the people that listen or consume the thing. And sometimes those people are the same people, right? Like, I was a listener first. Now I make shows and I help other people make shows, but I'm still very much a listener, and I do it because I love it. And I do it because it's important to keep up with what people are making that are not me, and that are not my clients, and that are not in my categories, genres, niches, all that stuff. So I think when people become creators, they often forget to also be consumers, or they are not thinking
or they're
critically.
Just not consuming podcasts. I think that was the big thing that I noticed about a lot of podcasters over the years, is the fact that they're typically not heavy consumers of podcasts.
Right. And it's, I don't want to ever say you must, I don't want to ever assign homework that you have to listen to podcasts, but, but I do, maybe I do want to assign homework and say it's important at least every so often to jump onto the podcast platforms. And yes, that might mean YouTube nowadays, to look at how your show shows up, but also how your competitors are showing up, how your potential collaborators are showing up, how complementary shows are presenting themselves, and even just what's the experience that a user or a fan might go through if they type in your keywords and your show pops up, or it doesn't. Who is popping up? Why are they popping up? What are they doing with their show notes? It's really important to look at all that. So the homework, if I can call it homework, extra credit, is to every so often go to the podcast apps or the podcatchers or the platforms, search for your show, search for other shows, go to the trending shows, go to the charts, see what's there, and listen to a few. Maybe you'll find something that you love that you want to continue checking out and become a fan of. Maybe you do it because it's an important thing. It's opposition research. But overall, you don't have to love it, but I think you do need to participate in the consumption landscape.
Yeah, and I think as we think about this much more broadly, there's been a lot of discussion, and I'm sure you've been in the middle of this too, is that somehow podcasts discovery is broken somehow, and it's failing us somehow, and it's to blame, Apple, or it's to blame Spotify. Is the
nobody wants to blame their own shitty content.
Right.
Like, the show has to be good in order for people to listen to it. And just because you think it's good doesn't mean that everybody will think it's good. This is, I mean, everything is subjective. So first and foremost, are you making it because you want to make it? That's great. You should make it. It should be your hobby. It should be your way to get out there and have a conversation with people that you wouldn't necessarily get to have conversations with otherwise. Reach an audience that that needs your message. It doesn't necessarily mean that your show is ready for mass appeal. This happens a lot when people get the advice that they need to have a video component to their podcast, and they think, okay, I really need to invest in video. Just because you invest in video, though, doesn't mean your show is automatically going to be shown to thousands of people in an algorithm on Spotify or on YouTube or wherever else. It doesn't mean you're entitled to an audience. It just means that you're participating in best practices of the moment that are telling you to do that. And yes, maybe you catch a couple thousand views here and there. Yeah. Then comes the question of, do those convert to your podcast? Do you want them to convert to your podcast, or are you okay with people just checking out that one video getting a ton of likes, comments, all that good stuff, and that's it? Maybe those likes, comments, all that good stuff lead to people going to your website, which leads to them booking a consultation with you or whatever your end goal is. Yeah. But all of these things must be considered.
Yeah, I do wonder if all these different places that people are consuming what we're calling podcasts are really kind of standalone, right? And there's not a huge amount of overlap. It's the same thing that we've been seeing happen with TikTok and Instagram and these other platforms, and even the YouTube Shorts especially. It's almost like these are siloed consumption platforms that there isn't a lot of crossover between somebody that watches a short and then chooses to go over and subscribe to your audio podcast. I'm just not sure that there's a lot of that going on.
The way that I look at it is first from my own consumption behavior, and then I try to ask questions about that. Personally, and this has been true for social media, I've been saying this forever. Yeah. When you're scrolling on social media and you see something about a podcast, maybe you clock that, maybe it hits that, oh, that would be interesting for me. But I'm not in the mindset, and I'm also not in the activity space at that moment to go and listen to that podcast. I know that there are certain things I like to be doing when I'm listening to podcasts. One of those things is not just sitting on the couch. Maybe there's something popping up in my Instagram feed that is so right up my alley that I'm going to change my activity space and go listen to that show. But most likely I'm clocking it, I'm thinking about it. It's one of the touch points that may or may not eventually get me to search for that show on my podcast listening app, or if I'm putting myself in somebody else's shoes, YouTube or Spotify or whatever it is, in order to go and check out the video version of it or the clips. I was in Washington Square Park recently with Lauren Passell, my longtime friend, collaborator, podcast enthusiast, friend, buddy. And we were conducting interviews with people on the street who decided to come over and talk to us after seeing a sign that we were holding up that said, "Come talk to us about podcasts." And we filmed these interviews with permission, of course. And we presented those interviews at On Air Fest. We presented snippets of them at On Air Fest. And a lot of our findings are fascinating. And I'll just give one away now, but if you're curious about more, I can share where to find them. One of them, a lot of people mentioned that. And the coolest part about this, I'll just back up and give some more information on it. The coolest part about it is we're trying our best when we're having these conversations to not put words in people's mouths, and just to hear how they naturally talk about finding podcasts, how they talk about how they consume them. So we used consumption rather than watch or listen because we wanted to see what they would say. And a number of people said that they discover podcasts by way of clips. They like those clips. Literally, they press like, they comment sometimes. They more likely are sharing with friends. And more than twice in our conversation, or twice out of 20 interviews that we did, people said that they clock the clips, but they've never checked out the show, but they still kind of identify that they are consumers of this podcast. So that's not reflected in the data. That's if the podcast creator goes to their consumption listen through rate on Apple or their YouTube views, that person is not going to show up there, but they are showing up on Instagram as an impression or a view or whatever. And that's just a fascinating tidbit, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it makes a lot of sense too, because if each one of these platforms, vertical videos, Instagram, YouTube, it's okay that certain listeners are listeners of your show on those platforms, because there's, for one thing, there's not much you can do about it. If you're publishing up there, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
all you can do really, I think, is just hope that they convert over to listening.
If you want them to,
right?
You know? Like,
yeah. So how do you change the content? Do you think in the shorts to make it more likely that they might convert?
So many things popping up right now because I'm thinking the TikTok doesn't want you to get off of TikTok. So they're not going to, not going to incentivize, or they're not going to push videos that are saying, if you want the rest of the episode, go now here. It has to be so enticing that the platforms push it, and people are so enamored with what you shared that they are going to either right then and there stop what they're doing, go to their podcast app, go to YouTube, or even just click on the link in your bio to see where they can hear the rest of that story or the rest of that piece of advice that you're sharing. So there's that. There's also the idea, or there's also the fact that people don't want to change their activity space. And speaking of creators, I think we need to get used to, as creators, putting ourselves in the shoes of even ourselves when we are consumers. So first of all, is what you're putting out there, is the cold open that you've selected to go at the top of your show actually enticing to anyone but you? Do you think that it does the job of getting people hooked? Or are you kind of just placing it there because you always start your show with a cold open? That might not be worth it. It might be worth it to switch things up. So this lesson to me applies in more than just does social media convert to podcast downloads? It's how do you put yourself in the shoes of a consumer who may be finding your show and deciding what to do with it? I had another point to make about kind of like consumption habits, but I'm sure I'll get back to it.
Well, I think that the other part of this too, that I've been publishing shorts for the stuff I've been doing for a couple of years now. And I just wonder if part of the issue is that a lot of the tools that we're using to generate these things, these AI tools, are not really
picking the best ones.
Right. Well, that as well, but also packaging these things in a way that would give the clip more likely to convert to a different format of consumption, right? Like a logo on the screen or
I don't necessarily think a logo on the screen is best practice.
Oh, I mean, don't? Okay.
I don't. But also I think best practice is to try a million different things and see what sticks. There is a platform that I'm interested in exploring more called Overlap. I think it's overlap.ai. And what they do is you feed your videos into it. It cuts it up into a million different things, a million different styles, and then it spreads it all over the internet. I mean, it helps you spread it all over the internet. They encourage what they call clips accounts. So spin-offs from your regular account. Essentially, it would be like new media show _clips or new media show fan account, even though it's made by you, but nobody needs to know that. And what they do is they post these clips and they test out different captions, and you can approve it and you can give it tone and texture and make sure that it's something that you are cool with putting out there. And if a video hits a certain number of impressions or comments or whatever metrics you've set up for it, that's when they encourage you to say, okay, let's make this a collaborative post, and then see if you can replicate that on your actual account. So they're playing this game of, if we put a lot out there, one of those things is going to pick up steam, whether it's because it's genuinely the best clip that's saying the thing that gets the people excited, or because for whatever reason, the algorithm has decided that they're going to push this one. So there are tools out there that are trying these things out. And just to get back to what I was saying about the logo, no logo, I know that there's no best practice yet, especially if your video, especially if you don't have that much organic traffic coming in, you don't have the data set to be making those decisions yet. So a lot of these bigger shows that can test out different cold opens, different angles, different even episode titles, they're going to have a lot more data a lot more quickly, a lot quicker, in order to figure out what their best practices are. But for smaller creators, maybe who are just getting started, I just say throw everything out there, see what sticks. If you find something that is sticking a little bit, try going in that direction a bit more. So maybe your captions are yellow rather than blue, even if it doesn't necessarily match with the aesthetic of your brand. Try those captions for the next few. If you are starting with a fade in, maybe it's worth starting kind of more with a flash, because that's the style that a lot of these video clips that are getting hundreds of thousands of likes and comments are doing. There's a lot more flexibility when it comes to clips because you're putting so many out there. You don't necessarily need to put out a work of art every single time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's still one of those areas that we're not really clear. I know on the YouTube short stuff, they've been battling this stuff around having a, like a vertical thumbnail type of experience versus just like capturing the screen of a part in the video where you've got your mouth open and you're exasperated and it's a split screen. There's a bunch of text on it and all that stuff, and it's kind of a mess.
Man, and like, have you seen Substack doing that? Have you seen the
I haven't
Substack is, first of all, like getting in a lot of trouble, as they should, because did you see this clip?
I haven't seen it.
There was a clip, Nilay Patel of Vergecast, I think.
Vergecast, right.
Interviewed the Substack maybe CEO, and Nilay was like, "Hey, there are Nazis posting on your site," and he's like, doesn't respond. And then Nilay is like, "Don't you think that, like, what's your stance on content moderation?" He wasn't even like, "That's not okay." He was like, "What's your stance?" And this guy was like, "I'm not going to comment on that." Well, and I don't know. So they're getting a lot of flack, doing their thing, getting a lot of flack. And they are also, after you go live, after you go live on Substack, there is an auto-generated video that you can post, or you can say, "I want to edit this," and then post it later. I always choose to do that, because if you post it right away, it posts it with a thumbnail of, they've smoothed your face, they've smoothed your guest's face, you do not look like yourself. They've AI'd you to the point that you're not you, and they've selected a thumbnail, or they've selected a title that doesn't make any sense. So this is also something that is not quite there yet. Yeah. When it comes to the repurposing game. I want to just go back quickly to something you were saying before about are people moving from one platform to another? And what I want to talk about is the cannibalization of the platforms. Right. This matters more with shows that are bigger, networks that are bigger, that are getting, like I was saying, millions, if not hundreds of thousands of impressions, downloads, visitors every episode, or every installment of whatever it is that they're putting out there. For example, if you are a show that knows that you get a much higher ad rate or CPM rate on your podcast than you do on YouTube, it might be worth moving people from YouTube to your podcast, especially nowadays if your podcast is visible on Spotify or something like that. Might be worth it for you. Whereas I think for a lot of creators who are either just getting started or whose total addressable market is just not ever going to be that big, maybe the game is be absolutely everywhere all at once, so that you can capture those impressions and sell them in a more manual way to potential sponsors or to members of your group or members of your community, in order to get them to share their message on your platform. I think for a lot of people who are at that stage, at more of the beginner stage, or the stage of show is not that big, won't be that big, or that big, let's say, I like the idea of being everywhere as a potential distribution, as a way of capturing people. And then naturally, they will fall into where they're most likely to consume what it is that you're putting out there. I also am a big advocate, I don't know if that's the word, I really believe that video eventually becomes a video. Somebody who discovers via video eventually will become an audio consumer, either as well, or it'll take over. And the reason for that is because there's a trickle down. People discover video by way of clips. They discover by way of YouTube algorithm, wherever else. And maybe they then go check out the show, or they check out the clip, and then they find out like a few minutes before the clip, a few minutes after, then they're done. Maybe the next time your show pops up, they do a little bit more, they become your fan. Then they need to go for a long drive, or they need to do something that is eyes free. Their eyes need to be somewhere else. They're going to start listening to the show. And that might mean listening on a video platform and just like not watching, glancing at it every once in a while, but they're becoming listeners.
Yeah. And I think it could be just kind of like a consumer, listener, viewer kind of pathway that we see shifting here as we look to the future too, right? I mean, a lot of the research has been showing that a growing number of people like the option of listening to the audio, and then if they don't finish in the car as they're coming home, that they pop into the living room and they finish it on the big screen, right? So you have this kind of like this journey that a consumer of this content travels with your content. And with the announcement that Apple made a few weeks ago around making HLS streaming, so it makes podcasts consumption on the video side more at parity with what YouTube has been doing and what Spotify is doing. So we're seeing this kind of convergence of sorts around this model of consumption that includes audio and video together. And that's what Apple is really going to enable, is the fact you go to one show in their interface and you can watch the video or you can listen. Now, I think where the friction is right now is that they're going to default to play the audio from the video as the audio portion of this, versus pulling it from the RSS feed, which would be audio only. I think that is just a temporary kind of difference right now. Spotify is doing that as well, where if you upload a video, the audio track from the video replaces the RSS feed audio. And I think over time, these platforms are going to have to adjust. And because I know I do, even with this show, is I create a different edit version for the audio than I do for the video. And I think most of the higher quality producers of podcasts,
if they care about their listeners, hopefully they're doing that. Yeah.
Right. Because you can do a deeper edit on the audio than you can do on the video.
Yeah.
Though you can do it on the video, and I know that the Descript tool will do deep audio edits.
I would go through that afterwards.
Right. And it's not as jerky as it used to be, right? So if you
because you can press a button that says like avoid sharp cuts.
Yeah, exactly. But what that causes, though, really, if you really watch the video, is that it causes sections of the video where the mouth is moving, but there's no sound coming out.
Not ideal. I do think it makes sense as of now, if Spotify is making video available, for it to be pulling just directly from the audio, just because that's like the easiest thing to do. And also because often if people are watching, like I was saying before, they're watching, glancing, sometimes listening. But if somebody prefers to listen to a show that is video, that's when it would be nice to have an audio first experience in addition to the video option.
So I would say that the platforms right now are definitely heading down the path of video being at the top of the funnel.
Spotify, Substack too, even. They want you to go live, and then they want you to create clips from your live. They want people to post those, have fans, consumers like that, interact with that, click on that, subscribe to your newsletter. The funnel goes on. Video, is definitely being pushed. And why is that the case? Because it's great to have eyeballs on the screen because of selling ads and because of watch time and being able to report those numbers.
Yeah, it's a lot of these big tech companies like to follow what the current buzz is in the market, right? It's not always rational.
Let's make audio buzz again. I'm going to make red hats that say make audio buzz again.
Right. But not buzz so it sounds bad.
Not actual audio quality, but just make it buzzy.
Right. So I do think that there's an adjustment that the industry is going to go through, and I think increasingly it's monetization is what's driving this. And I think it was like what you were saying, is that even Apple is going to be able to make money from a video that's uploaded to their platform, that then they use the audio from the video because they're going to get a cut of the ad insertion on a per insertion fee. And so there is a little bit of a financial motivation that's driving this too, because Apple doesn't make money off of programmatic advertising in a RSS-based audio insertion type of a scenario into their platform.
Which is why they were pushing and still continue to push subscriptions, because that's the way that they make money as of now.
Yeah. Though I would say that the premium subscription part has been probably a pretty low revenue generator for them.
Yeah.
So
I guess it's better for their partnerships with some of the larger media companies in order to enable that, make it an easy experience for the fans.
So let's kind of move on from that and talk a little about other elements that people should be thinking about right now around being discoverable, like you had mentioned earlier, and the kind of discovery part. Now, what's the difference between being discoverable and being able to be discovered?
I mean, I think we're talking about quality. Anybody can get discovered using the right keywords and using the right thumbnail and popping up in the right places, paying to pop up in the right places. But being discoverable, no. Being a show that people want to come back to is another story in and of itself. We talked before about your quality and if your show is quote unquote good enough. And of course, this is subjective. Your show is going to be great to some people, intolerable to others. And that's just something that you'll learn over time and decide to tweak or not based on the audience that you want to cultivate and keep. But ultimately, what we need to be thinking about when it comes to being discoverable is, who are we serving? What's the audience that we're serving? Are we in communication with them in some way? Meaning, are they emailing you? Are you emailing back? Do you have a survey? Are you actually taking the findings of the survey and applying them? Or literally, when you are recording your show, are you speaking to people? Are you speaking to many people? Do you have a relationship with your audience? Do they have a relationship with you? That's one way to be recommendable, is to create that relationship. And another way to become recommendable discoverable, whatever, is to be following best practices, like we were saying before, about being aware of what else is out there and being in conversation with those shows, whether it's literally responding to your competitor's take on something that happened in your industry, or whether you disagree with them or agree with them, having that conversation, but also being in the conversation of, okay, everybody in my niche, their cover art looks like this. It has a face on it. I'm going to buck the trend and do something else. So being in conversation like that is also important. Being aware of how your show is showing up on these podcast platforms. So is it optimized? On YouTube, is your thumbnail, does it look good? Is it telling us what we're going to get out of this episode? What about your bio on Castbox, for example? You can create a free account and you can populate your bio. You can put your social media links there so that if people listen to your show and like it, they can click and they can send you a message or leave you a comment right in the app. Are you regularly checking in with the podcast apps that you are on, which, spoiler alert, you're on all of them, and responding to comments there and being in communication with those listeners? There's also another side of this, which is, I said this before, anybody can make their show discoverable. Your show, you can use the right keywords, you can use the right cover art, you can do this, you can do that. There's also a difference between using the right keywords, making the right cover art, and then having a shitty product. Like, you can create a veneer, a facade of a great show and then not actually deliver a great show. So it's important to have expectations that match, set the expectations, keep the expectations going, which is why I think trailers are so important as an on-ramp to a potential listener, an onboarding experience. And then I want to talk a little bit about the balance between keywording and being a human. It's really important to use keywords, sure, but I see some podcast titles and episode titles that just go on forever. And it is so clear that you are just playing with keywords and hoping, and it doesn't always work, first of all. And then it's also so wordy and so inaccessible.
Yeah, no, I think that this is probably one of the most important topics that we could talk about right now, about the being discoverable. I think it's probably not something that gets talked about as much because it is so complex and there's so many layers to this. I think it's just easier for people to just say, well, podcast discovery is broken.
Yeah, I agree. It's a crutch.
And it's just not getting to the point. And I think it's getting even more complex too. I think AI is changing things on the being discoverable part. There's whole new protocols. It's not all about SEO anymore.
No.
It's like AGO and AIO and these new kind of search
just
protocols.
Wait till the podcast gurus get their hands on those acronyms, because then they'll start talking about it and the whole conversation will change. My point is, this is how the public, this is how the creators get their information, is right. And this is how they make decisions, is what they hear from people who are giving this advice. And then they still will find a way to say podcast discovery is broken.
Right. Because it's easier to blame Spotify and blame Apple because people aren't finding, there's too many podcasts in the catalog.
Not every podcast, first of all, deserves an audience. I'm sorry, this sounds so mean. You deserve an audience, listeners to this show right now. And literally, I mean everybody, but not every show deserves the biggest audience in the world. And it is possible that you've reached your cap and maybe you just need to find a way to be in conversation with those people who love you.
Well, I think your genre plays a big role in the audience scale potential that you have. And it's sometimes hard to know what that is. How do we know? It's like with this show, it's a good example. Any podcast about podcasting or new media has a limited audience to it. It's only people that are creating content usually that have an interest in learning about this. It's not like gonna compete with like a Joe Rogan podcast. It's just not broad enough, or on a topic that people have a lot of interest in, like maybe it's politics or maybe it's sports or something like that.
Yeah, or two best friends chatting, where people just like the personality of those two best friends.
Well, that's true too. If it's an entertaining show, if it's talking about social issues, if it's talking about, those have a much broader appeal, which makes it easier to have your show be discovered, right?
But it also means you're competing with a lot of other people.
They're popular shows, right? Yeah.
So there's a lot there.
So I think these, especially as we move into this new era of AI, where I would say probably in the next 3 to 4 years, pretty much all audience discovery of content is going to come through some sort of an AI engine of some sort.
Which is why I'm going to double down on the human curation of my newsletter. And I think...
Well, that's part of it, though. I think the human curation part is going to be used by the AI.
Totally.
So how do you make that human creation or the human curation be something that kind of plays into what the algorithms want? Because ultimately, the algorithms are going to drive all of the audience.
Although I mentioned this when you asked me earlier what we wanted to talk about today, like what are some of the things I'm thinking about? And one of them is, I was having a conversation a few weeks ago with Stephen O'Grady, who writes a newsletter called Podcast Delivery. Okay. And people talk about podcast discovery problems all the time, just like is the title of this episode, just like is the majority of our conversation. Yeah. And I actually think the same reason that podcast discovery is a problem is the same reason that podcasts and podcasting is such a great space, and it's such a democratized space. Just the fact that when your podcast episode finishes on Apple Podcasts or on Pocket Casts or on Castbox or on Good Pods or on Overcast, the fact that you're not served up another episode that might have similar keywords or another tag that matches it together, or people who listen to this might also listen to this. The fact that that's not automatically suggested to you means that you get to make your own choice and not necessarily fall into a rabbit hole of this is what the algorithm wants you to listen to or to consume. And that's a feature, not a bug to me.
Yeah. Just insert the word YouTube into that, because that's exactly what YouTube does, is that it.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you're watching
that's what
this,
I'm talking about. YouTube,
you must have an interest in it, and it's going to give you just a cascade of.
That's what I'm referring to, along with Spotify to an extent. That they don't really have as great of a because a lot of people do love the YouTube algorithm. It's a great way to find stuff, but would you find it on your own? And would you find it on your own? Some people want to be shown that. I think that what's great about podcasts is that you need to seek it out. You need to actively look for what are your friends listening to.
Yeah, I know that, Todd Cochran, my former host on this show, he would tell me that he doesn't use the YouTube wall. He goes into his subscriptions in YouTube to find the shows that he wants to watch. So he doesn't rely on that algorithm to match up his interests. So let's say he's on his wall looking at all of the thumbnails, right? And he clicks on a particular show that maybe had an interesting hook in it or something like that. And he goes and watches that. And then from that point on, that's all he sees is a show that's similar to that. And maybe he really didn't have an interest in that.
Exactly.
So you get kind of pigeonholed in here, but if you go in and human curate your playlist of sorts, then that puts you in a more of a control position.
I'm going to do an experiment in the coming weeks, which is I'm going to make a few separate accounts on YouTube that I'm going to incognito browser it and hope that cookies don't catch up with me in any way. Yeah. And I'm going to start by searching for the number one podcast of that day, which is either going to be Joe Rogan or like Mel Robbins or Amy Poehler or whatever. I'm going to go to YouTube, let that play, and then just let the algorithm go and go and go. And then the next day I'm going to do it for the next podcast that's within that top 10 and go and go and go and see where it takes me after I don't know how long. And the point of this is, where am I being sent according to the YouTube gods, as opposed to where might I go based on if I were to listen to Amy Poehler's show and she has somebody on who happens to have a podcast, or they talk about a podcast, or they talk about a YouTube channel, where would I go in that case? And how do those things differ? I think that'll be an interesting experiment.
Yeah. And I do wonder where YouTube goes with this. I mean, are they going to be able to get in our heads a little deeper, right? And have a better understanding of what our interests are, not just what we're clicking on at that moment, right?
Yeah. And that's why the shorts are so great for both the back end of YouTube and the back end of TikTok, because they're shorter. So people can skip through them if literally the color of somebody's blouse in the first 3 seconds, I never say blouse, shirt, in the first 3 seconds of this clip is not of interest, then YouTube can say, okay, she doesn't like green, right? Or TikTok can say that, because the volume that we're going through is so much more than if I'm sitting down to watch a 45-minute video on YouTube. Maybe I make it 20 minutes in and then I'm like, I'm done. But that's, 2 videos in an hour as opposed to 30, 40, 50, depending on how many so many data points with these shorts. And that's why shorts are so valuable also to these platforms.
Yeah. So I know you've really been focused on trying to kind of build out an approach here around human curation.
Yeah.
Which can involve, like the Trailer Park podcast that you do, which is basically putting out a podcast that is like a recommendation engine for other creators, which I think lots of people in the industry appreciate that you're doing that. I've done podcasts like that before too. When I was working at Microsoft, I did it's called the Weekly Download. And I basically played clips from, I think it was 6 different podcasts in the podcast that gave a sample, right? So I was trying to drive people to, try out a bunch of different shows, right?
Yeah.
And not just get locked into, the 3 or 4 shows that they have in their subscription catalog, but to get in and try some different shows out. And so how do you see that playing right now? Is that really an important driver of what you see going forward that we're going to have to do, is create like curated playlists, a recommendation culture of sorts?
I really believe that. I don't just believe this is backed up by conversations that I have, data that Edison Research puts out, Sounds Profitable puts out. Word of mouth is still number one.
Yeah.
People really care what other people say. People are really influenced by other people. Even if and it's not a close second, but even if the next most popular way of discovering something is an algorithm, word of mouth is still so much more. It just gets you to do it so much more. And maybe you can't trace exactly why, but having an endorsement from somebody who watched it, who's saying you would love this because, is so strong. So yes, I think human curation is big. And all of it, though, I was talking to somebody earlier today about the silver bullet to podcast growth, and I'm so over it because there is zero silver bullet. There's too many different variables, too many different factors of what might make a show word of mouth recommendable to a certain group at a certain time, even a specific episode that will be great with this group now, not tomorrow. So no silver bullet. And with that in mind, we really just have to be trying a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've seen really grow and develop over the last few years is podcasters, or basically podcasts that have good personal brands that build trust and things like that, are building their own private communities and creating environments and a platform for people to connect with other listeners to a particular creator's content, and creating a dynamic that is more direct and actually goes around these algorithms and plays in a more human to human basis. Do you see that accelerating?
I do. Amongst groups, communities, creators that it's actually right for. But
so what's the criteria there, do you think?
I'll just give a few examples. If your show is a morning news podcast, you drop it every morning at 6 a.m. I think it's going to be hard for you to have a community of people who come in, are curious, and to be in conversation with each other, because that's a utilitarian show that they're using in order to get to work. But if your show is about a particular rare disease, that's an awesome way to, not an awesome way. That's a show that is going to be helpful, useful. It's going to pull on the emotions of somebody who needs to be part of that community. That's a great reason to build a community. But similar to the video question, just because you build a community does not mean that the people are going to come and want to be part of it. And even if you get them there by way of paid ads or incentives, it doesn't mean that they're going to be active there. It needs to be a really strong offer. And even before that, they need to be the ones clawing at your door to want that community to start, or maybe they even started it on their own. So community might not be for everyone, but it can be really powerful for the people that it does work for. And if you as the creator can tap into that, whatever's bringing those people together, you can create a space that they are hanging on your every word. They want to do everything that you tell them. They want to consume everything that you put out.
Yeah. So I guess that sounds like, to me, it's really zeroing in on an interest niche, right? Has a ingrained need for deeper information that is solving a very primary concern, interest, or challenge that people are out there are having. And I think that's actually if you were to backpedal on that to some degree, that is probably a good strategy to create a podcast.
I always say this. If you just want to start, like I'll see on Threads all the time. I'm pretty active on Threads now. People will post, and they've posted this on Twitter. They posted this on LinkedIn beforehand, wherever. People will post, I want to start a podcast. What should I talk about? That's bad, because you should probably have an idea if you want to start a podcast of what you want to start a podcast about. However, let's take the opposite of that, which is like, maybe first you do research into a community that's underserved or a topic that's underserved, and then you become the person to fill that void. It's probably not a great idea in the long run, because I do think you need to be passionate about the thing and you need to have personal experience with it in order to really show up for that community. But kind of just as a cheeky aside, I think that is a funny way to look at it. And ultimately, when somebody's thinking about starting a show and they know the general topic, it's really important. It's necessary to do research into what other pieces of, or what other channels are out there that are serving this group, and what are those channels not doing that you could be doing? When do those people tend to consume podcasts, video, audio, whatever? Do they tend to discover podcasts by way of clips? Those are important factors that will hopefully determine how you make your show and how you go about getting it to that audience. Yeah,
it's the matchup between the creator or the person that's starting this podcast or wanting to build a community of what their passions are. And oftentimes I've seen this work very well with people that have had, let's say, a health problem or something like that, that was spreading. If it was a certain kind of cancer or something like that, then they would create a community that would offer support information and resources to those that have, whether it be diabetes or something like that. And this is just an example of that niche down matching information to a need that people, and it's not to exploit people's challenges. It's more to really service people and helping them. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're doing it as a dual purpose. You're doing it to help people, but you're doing it also to help yourself to some degree.
It also could be that you go on the internet. I mean, I've seen kind of like the uncharitable read of this is go on the internet, go to one of those websites where you can figure out popular search terms and fill a need.
Yeah.
But again, I think you need to have some sort of connection to that in order to be successful.
I think you're right. I think a lot of what follows this too is credibility and follows experience. And do you have a reputation for being, especially if you're talking about health or whatever, are you a doctor?
People can tell when you're an interloper. It's so obvious.
Right. And trust is so difficult to obtain now. It's just a world of growing distrust. So how does that play into your thinking on this as you talk to people around trust building? Just curious.
I think being there is one thing, showing up, making the thing, whether it's week after week or month after month, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be super consistent. I used to preach consistency above all else. I do think consistency is important if you have certain goals, and it should not be thrown away. But more importantly is delivering on your promise. So if you tell people you're going to put something out every week and you don't put something out every week, that's when it becomes a problem. But I'm going to publish when I can, when an episode, when there's inspiration, always going to let you know why I'm making this episode, who's on this episode, what you can expect from this episode. That's a big part of building trust, is telling people something and doing that thing. And then even throughout the episode, letting them know that you're doing the subset of that thing. So building trust by being there, building trust by showing up when you don't necessarily have to. So maybe that's in real life. Maybe that's by creating resources that people can download that are genuinely helpful, that maybe cost you money to make, or whatever it is. Just really showing your dedication to this niche, to this community, is a really great way. And I'm finding that I'm being a little bit broad here because I'm speaking about myself, and I know that my niche is pretty niche, meaning like I talk to podcasters about making podcasts, or I talk to people that are interested in the podcast space, or who are interested in the podcast space for a little bit because they're making a show to go along with a book that they're launching, or they work for a nonprofit that wants to make a show because they just got a couple $100,000 in funding and they have a mandate to connect with the community. So I spend a lot of time making resources for free that take me time, that translate to money, but these things end up coming back to me in the long run and help people trust me. So I think that there's an equivalent for that for you and your niche.
Yeah, I think it is true to say that we've evolved into podcasting not necessarily being a silo. It's part of other things now.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to think about it too. Is like if you're a creator, and I know you've been really working hard in the newsletter side of things, and that is an example of what I'm talking about, is that there's a variety of different ways that you can reach and touch your community or your listeners or increasingly your viewers. on a regular basis too, is that other types of content can create those bond connections as well.
And they can lead people back to whether it's your podcast or to your website. I have a downloadable free resource for podcasters who are curious about starting newsletters to go along with their podcast. And I made it because I write a lot of newsletters and I enjoy setting up newsletters. And if somebody were to hire me to do that, great, not necessarily the goal. And I think that's part of why people trust me is like, I don't stink of desperation, even though sure, it would be nice to get some dollars for this thing. But ultimately I'm putting out resources that I have obtained because I've studied the space. I've taken the time to try out every single newsletter, email service provider, know the ins and outs of it. And I'm going to share that with you for free because it's just a good thing to do. And ultimately it'll come back to me. And it also means that I know a lot about how a newsletter can drive people to your podcast or how a podcast can drive people to your newsletter. And again, it goes back to the cannibalization question of where do you want people? And do you care that more people discover you by way of your podcast and just stay on the podcast? Or do you want them to go to the newsletter? Or what if somebody discovers you by way of the pretty robust Substack search engine and doesn't really care that you have a podcast, but really gets value out of your weekly newsletter or your weekly essay? Maybe that's a good thing because eventually you can also sell ads in your newsletter.
So what are you seeing is a key factor to maintain fairly high open rates when it comes to newsletters and email type of communications? I mean, I see a lot of people struggle to, get back on email and stuff. And I would imagine that impacts newsletters too. People get flooded with these things. And so what kind of tips or tricks can you recommend on the newsletter side that gets people to open? Is it consistency?
It's maybe consistency, but more so making your email look like there's a human behind it. I see a lot of newsletters that try to use the mail merge effect of hello, first name. And first of all, even ignoring the when it messes up and just says first name, but let's say it gets your name right.
Right.
I know that you're not actually talking to me. So own it. It's okay if your newsletter
don't pretend. Right.
Yeah. It's okay if your newsletter is speaking to a couple hundred or a couple thousand or even more people. We know that's okay. But are you delivering something in there that's speaking to me as a human that tugs on my pain points? So is your subject line written by a human? Is it written for humans? Again, back to the discussion of keywords versus being a human. Can you use both? Can you figure out a way to marry the two? So that's how to maintain people to open, but that's how to maintain like sheer opens, but your open rate within that, you probably got to cull your lists every once in a while, especially if you're buying ads, to get people to subscribe to your newsletter. You're going to get people who are curious just because they see that, on a place that they trust, they're going to subscribe to your newsletter. They don't like it because the first issue wasn't for them. They either unsubscribe or just like stop opening it. That's going to affect your open rates. So I recommend setting up some sort of crawler. And a lot of the email service providers have this where it can be a dynamic thing that updates every week or every month or whatever and says, okay, these 100 people haven't opened the newsletter or haven't clicked the newsletter in the last 6 months. Maybe it's time to get rid of them. Or send them another email that's like, hey, you might not actually be interested. That's okay. Feel free to unsubscribe or stay on, Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not using
I would rather have a smaller audience
platform
that's engaged.
to send things to people that nobody's ever reading, right?
I would much rather have a small audience that is highly engaged than an audience that is huge, that has a tiny percent of engagement or has a tiny engagement rate with me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Arielle, it was great to have you on the New Media Show. I think you've been on before. I don't think this is the first time.
I think it's my third time. I've done one virtual and then I did one in person and it's always a good time. And I love the New Media Show. And I just learned that there's a conference that just happened.
Yeah, it's called the
Dallas,
New
New Media Show. Yeah. Dallas, Austin, something. Anyway, do you go to that?
No, I did kind of.
They stole your keywords, man.
I know. I did reach out to the organizer of it, but I never heard back from him. So I think he's I think he's trying to play in a different realm than podcasting. So he's trying to play with this whole area of the really big creators that are garnering millions and millions of dollars and millions of views and stuff. So
they're using the technology of podcasts, and for that, you should get a royalty.
Right. There you go. We plowed the ground for them, right? So, all right. Well, so what are a couple of the best places for people to go see what you're doing? I'm sure you have a couple of websites.
Yes. And I buy domains all the time. I am most active on LinkedIn lately, and that's just my name. And then I recently started a newsletter with my friend Lauren, who I've mentioned before. We collaborate on a lot of podcast stuff. Newsletter is called Podcasts We Text About, and it is born from the idea that we are messaging constantly, sometimes about the content within the shows that we listen to, but often zooming out and thinking about the big picture of what does it mean to have a relationship with your co-host, and what happens when you can tell that these co-hosts hate each other. And for example, today earlier,
love-hate relationship. That's what usually happens.
We put out an issue recently about the concept of running a re-airing episodes in your feed that you've published before, and how that's okay, but you need to name them in a way that gets me excited and actually makes me want to listen. And then you also probably need to nurture the person who clicks on it, realizes it's an old episode. Why have you played that for us? Tell us.
Right.
Is this perfect for a new listener who maybe isn't familiar with your back catalog? Even if you are familiar with the back catalog, why should I listen to this? And of course, not everybody's going to listen to every episode, but this is what we discuss in this thing. So
yeah, I think it'd be good to kind of do a slightly different lead in to it, right?
Exactly.
Just give a little explanation of why I'm republishing this because it was so important for these reasons, or something
because
like
you
that.
Must take a break, and that's okay. Just tell people.
Just be straightforward with people, right? Is the key. But Arielle, thank you for spending time with me on the New Media Show. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure you'll be back at some point in the future.
Would love to be back. Thank you. And thank you to all the listeners and the viewers.
Well, we have both. No question about that.
That's why I acknowledged you.
Thank you. So this is a changing landscape with what Apple announced a few weeks ago. And so I think we will see more of an emphasis around video going forward and not so much just YouTube video. So I think it's going to be an interesting kind of adjustment that we see happen to the podcasting space. Is it just going to be the same video that gets put out onto YouTube, or are we going to see another splintering of the space where there's different video on Apple Podcasts than there is in YouTube? So, which could happen. So, but it adds a lot of complexity to creators' kind of processes. But, well, thank you for watching the episode, and thank you, Arielle, for making it happen here and making a terrific guest for me. It's always interesting to talk with you and get your kind of on the ground, raw perspective on this whole topic of helping people find podcasts and helping creators find their audiences. So I think it's great. Well, good night, everybody. Thank you so much. And if you want to check out more episodes of the New Media Show, you just go to newmediashow.com. I've got links to all the RSS feeds and video right on that page. And you can also watch the live show when the show's live on that page as well. So thank you so much. Good night. Or good day.